Welcome everyone to another episode of ClancyPasta. I hope you all enjoy the first creepy tale of the night, One Particular Night, written by Maleficent Spell 5621. Why are you so scared of going out at night? My friend Larissa whines as she lays with her legs propped up on the wall of my bedroom. Bears, bobcats, other humans. Don't you remember that we live in pretty much the middle of nowhere? I ask. She wants to sneak out and walk a couple roads over to the boy's house that she's been talking to. She sits up quickly, her long sandy-colored hair swinging over her shoulder. First off, I've never seen a bear in my whole 15 years of living here. Secondly, bobcats? Do they even exist? Yes, I whisper, not intending for her to hear. And thirdly, she says louder, there isn't even anyone awake. It's like 1:30 in the morning. You live around a bunch of old people. I smile a tad, but my stomach clenches when I glance out my bedroom window into the blinding darkness. I'm not going out. Weird stuff happens at night, dude, I sigh. Like what? I jump up and grab a shoebox from under my bed. I dig through my knickknacks until I finally find the paper that contained the story that scarred me and kept me from going out at night. Here, read this, I say, as I hand Larissa the slightly crumpled paper. What is this? It's a story my dad wrote. Apparently it actually happened to his dad. Read it. She opens the paper slowly and begins to read. September 12, 1953. Joseph Everett Thomas was a hard-working man. He spent the majority of his days in the boiling sun, entrenched in the tobacco patches, tending to the crop. He was only 21 and had worked as hard as any middle-aged man in the area did in his whole life. His father taught him how to work and how to have a passion for it. Many nights he left the fields fatigued and sluggish from the sweltering weather. On that one particular night, he did. While Joseph was hardworking, he enjoyed spending time with his friends. He would leave work to go meet up with a plethora of guys who hung around the small, family-owned grill that was about 2 football fields away from his home place. They would convene around the tabletops, talking and goofing off, until the owner forced them to leave so he could lock up for the night. Sometimes on Saturdays, the owner, John, would let them stay an hour after the official closing time. He appeared displeased with them, but in reality, he adored their company. Especially Joseph's. They had a close relationship, and John saw him as a son rather than a customer. Joseph would spend hours after school, when he attended it, at the grill chatting with John about the baseball team and how he predicted that they would be that year. Joseph left the grill a bit earlier on the night of the occurrence. He usually stayed till 11 or 11:30 at night, but he was exhausted from the unusually difficult day of working for his father. "Can't believe you're leaving this early, Jet," Rick, his closest friend of the bunch, said. His friends called him Jet because that was what his initials spelled. Joseph knew that leaving at 9:30 was very early for him, considering he had only been there an hour, and the bantering about the local high school's football team had barely started. But he was tired, and still had to feed the chickens since his parents went to town for the night. "I know, Rick, but I've got to feed the chickens and try to get some rest. I haven't been sleeping well lately," Joseph replied. He really had been having a hard time sleeping. An unfamiliar dread washed over him every time he had laid his head down on his pillow for the past week. He didn't understand it, and he craved a peaceful night's rest. Rick scrunched his nose, his skin turned a darker shade than before from the slight sunburn he'd accumulated. He thought Joseph was lying, but he knew how Joseph was and how he loved sitting around and shooting the bull. "Okay, but we are meeting at Speedy's tomorrow morning. You gonna be there?" Joseph sneered. He knew Rick was going to hold this against him for a couple days before he would get over it. He could already see him corner himself at the tiny, rock-built gas station, which was Speedy's, and question him about his night's rest. "Yes, I'll be there," he finally replied. "Okay, I'll see you then." Rick returned to the flat-top haircut circle of men. Joseph began his trek up the one-lane road that led to his home place. There were no street lights and little to none of the moon's light shining upon the road. Both sides of the street consisted of deep forests that were so dark, if you stared long enough, your eyes were sure to make the limbs of the trees look menacing and unnatural. That was one reason why he kept his eyes locked on his feet in front of him. He was not a superstitious person because of his Christian faith passed down from his father, but something about the woods where he lived seemed off. That night, the moon seemed to hide itself behind every cloud that passed in the gloomy sky. All possibilities of a glimmer of light were gone. Usually he didn't care when this happened, but tonight, possibly from the lack of sleep, he was paranoid. His eyes ached to look into the dark forest, a part of him just wanting to see crimson glowing eyes glaring back. But he wouldn't let himself. He didn't want to frighten himself that much more. He just needed to get home. He allowed himself to peel his eyes from his feet to see how much further he had to go. And that's when he saw it. A figure glided effortlessly 2 yards ahead of him. It had the shape of a man but was inhumanly tall. Joseph stopped dead in his tracks. The dread he felt while he was trying to sleep washed over him, threatening to drown him and suck all the air he had in his lungs out. How long had this thing been in front of him? Had it been there the whole time he had been walking up the road? These were questions that filled his mind. The figure stopped the second Joseph did. Did it hear him? Did he gasp? He couldn't remember, and he silently scolded himself. It stood before him, so obscure that it had no features, just a shadowy pit that seemed darker than any darkness he had ever seen before. He felt helpless. Should he turn and go the other direction, back to the safety of the cheery grill filled with hooting and hollering about things that didn't matter? He didn't want to put his back to this thing, though. Who would? Maybe he could slowly walk around it and skip through some yards until he made it to his home. Joseph slowly picked up his leg that felt like it was submerged in a thick sludge, barely getting it to move from being frozen with fear. One step after another, he began to gently walk. The figure in front of him started drifting forward at the same pace he did. What was it doing? Joseph realized that he had stopped once again, not even noticing. The figure stopped. It had to know that he was behind it. How else would it know when to walk and when to stop? How could it see him? It walked like a man with his back facing towards him, so how could it know exactly when he started walking and the exact speed? Could it hear his footsteps? He was almost positive his feet were making no noise as his boots touched with each step. The fear that consumed Joseph's chest seemed to swallow him whole. His instincts took over as he began to sprint past the thing. His fight-or-flight impulse kicked into flight before he could even make the decision. His panic formed itself into tears that lined the bottom of his eyes as he ran, but not blurring his vision severely enough to notice the figure ahead of him running at the same speed. Joseph stopped again, defeated, not trying to control the loud slaps on the ground that his slowing steps made. He bent over, the night air burning his lungs. Gradually, he looked up to see the figure standing motionless in front of him. "Who are you?" he screamed. "What do you want?" Silence engulfed his ears. The only sound was the distant buzz of the katydids. The figure did not budge or react like anything had been said to it. This infuriated Joseph. He felt all of his emotions jumble into pure anger. He did the only thing he could think of. He walked. He walked the rest of the way home, practically following the figure, playing with it, walking faster, then slower. He just wanted to watch it mimic him. At one moment he thought it might just be his shadow, but what light source was around to make it? The moon was invisible, and the forest surrounding him was so dark it could swallow you alive, so he knew his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. Slowly, he made it to his home. He finally made it to cross the rickety bridge that led to his home, but the figure kept going. It coasted up the road until it reached a fallen log. It slid up the log and up the connecting hill that led to a few houses. Joseph felt himself take a deep, relaxing breath. He could go in and just sleep. He could forget about that damn thing, and he could just sleep. That night, Joseph slept better than he had in weeks. There was no dread or worry that kept him awake and staring at the wooden ceiling of his room. He was so relaxed that he even forgot about feeding the chickens. The next morning, he awoke to the sun shining through the yellowing blinds. The daunting road that he walked up last night was now a beautiful lush woodland that could appeal to anyone. He got himself ready and made his way to the gas station to meet his friends. Upon reaching the gas station, Joseph saw his friends congregating in a crowd outside the front door. This was odd, but he did not think anything of it. "Hey, what are you guys doing standing out here?" he said with a laugh. No one answered him. An unusually somber feeling was floating in the air. Rick looked at him, his eyes bloodshot with tears. "Didn't you hear about John?" "What? No. What happened?" Joseph asked urgently. "He died in his sleep last night. Had a heart attack." Joseph felt sick. He felt his insides quiver as he remembered the figure that crossed the log. It went right up the hill, right up to John's house. He relieved himself from the group as he walked to the side of the store. He covered his face with his hands, realizing what he had seen that night. He had seen death, and he had felt that it was coming. The uneasiness in bed he felt nights before made sense now. Part of him believed that death was originally coming for him, but by some streak of luck, he decided to go another way on that one particular night. The beast is lurking, and it wants you to follow it. Written by Mr. SLC. I don't know where it came from or when it first found me, but the beast has been around, stalking, waiting. The late night had turned into early morning. I was tossing and turning, too hot underneath the blankets, too cold without them. Turning on the TV didn't help. Turning it off didn't either. My brain was too loud, louder than the TV. At some point I rolled over, facing the window. The curtains were not quite drawn all the way. Some fragment of moonlight had slipped through. I could see a sliver of the night sky. It was beautiful out there. I remember wondering what it would be like to float up toward those stars, peacefully leaving my bed and home and worries and everything else behind. I saw two little flashes of yellow light, like fireflies buzzing outside my window. I convinced myself that's just what they were. Fireflies. The firefly creatures hovered for a few more moments before floating away. I fell asleep soon after and didn't wake up again until my alarm sounded off. Unknowingly, that was my first encounter with the beast, that I know of, at least. It appeared again days later. I was on my lunch break, parked outside a fast food joint, eating some cheap meal. The YouTube video I had playing on my phone was my only company. For some reason, I couldn't begin to say why, I looked straight ahead and stared intently at the woods across the street. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I saw the yellow creatures hiding in the dark of the woods, just as bright as they were a few nights before. It took me a minute, though, to realize that these weren't separate creatures at all. They were the eyes of a single entity. Its body was darker than anything I had ever seen. It was a void in my eyesight. It had no discernible shape, not that I could tell from a distance. I didn't know what to call it, so I called it the Beast. Any peace that the fireflies had given me when I first saw them as something more beautiful than the glowing eyes of a monster was gone. Dread rolled over me. My nerves were shot. The Beast became my new normal. It didn't matter where I was, I could always find the Beast if I looked hard enough. It could be hiding in the parking lot beyond my office window, or on the roof of a building as I walked down the street. I could block every window in my house, lock all the doors, hide in a closet, and the Beast's yellow eyes could still be seen when I closed my own. At first, I tried to deny that I was seeing anything. Nobody else seemed to notice it. I was afraid to ask about it, knowing the people around me would call me crazy, tell me to see a doctor, laugh in my face, or insist that I belong in a mental institution. I kept the Beast to myself. Eventually, it became easier to accept. I was no longer afraid of it. The worst it could do is distract me, try to scare me, and slow my pace down. Maybe it would keep me awake for too long some nights. I can't deny that the Beast's presence affected me. It did, but I became less afraid of it over time and accepted it as a discomfort in my life, like a constant ringing in my ears or a chronic toothache. I didn't like it, but I could manage. That was the case for a while, at least. I saw the Beast up close for the first time last night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, just like I had been when I first saw its eyes. The Beast came to me. Maybe it entered through one of the doors. Maybe it just appeared there at the foot of my bed like a demon summoned by some inhuman ritual. I don't know, but somehow the latter seems more likely. My bedroom light was on, and I could see the Beast clearly. The Beast is tall, taller than I had thought possible. It has the head of a pig, the body of a Sasquatch, and black fur. It huffed and exhaled smoke that formed a cloud between it and me. I remember the way its eyes shone clearly through the smoke, as if it wasn't there at all. By making eye contact with it, I had become paralyzed. The temperature in the room had dropped by 30 degrees or more. My first thought was that I was dead and this was Satan himself coming to take me under. I convinced myself I was alive only by listening to the beating of my heart that had gone from a smooth beat to a drum roll. The Beast raised an enormous hand the size of a baseball glove. I wanted to scream so loud that the roof of my house blew off, but no sound could escape, not even a peep. The Beast dropped its hand onto my exposed ankle and clamped down. It ripped me from my bed and dragged me by the ankle. The Beast took one slow step at a time, huffing occasionally, but never looking back at me. My bare back scraped the carpet, then the concrete of my back patio, then the damp grass of my backyard. The Beast led me into the woods. Twigs and pine cones and rocks sliced and grated skin off my back. I could feel the moisture underneath me, a mixture of the night's dew and my own blood. No matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake loose the Beast's grip. I couldn't scream, cry, beg, plead, or even ask nicely for the Beast to please, oh dear God, please let me go. I was absolutely, utterly defenseless. I must have passed out at some point. I don't know how far the Beast dragged me. I came to, and the first thing I noticed was how bright everything was. I was lying on my back, staring up, and noticed that the sky was still black. Why is everything so bright? That newly familiar noise had returned again. The beast's guttural huffing, like the roar of a tiger, was accompanying each twig breaking and leaf crunching step the beast took. It was getting closer, slowly. The ground trembled every time it thumped its foot against the dirt. The thumping grew louder and the trembling became stronger and stronger, until finally the beast was standing over me, its pig head seeming to touch and bend in with the dark sky. I made eye contact with the beast again. The beast huffed again and smoke filled the air over me. The smell of it lingered. I noticed that the air was hot, getting hotter. Perhaps it was the intent that snapped my senses back into place. I immediately realized the loud noises surrounding me. Everything around me snapped, crackled, and, yes, popped. I jumped up and, for a split second, just the shortest amount of time, I wasn't concerned with the beast or the heat or the noises around me. I was relieved that I could move again. The beast walked a few yards away just as I had started up. The air behind me was unbearably hot. I turned and, to no surprise, a wall of flames was coming toward me. I bid my time from the flames by moving toward the beast. It was standing before a deep hole. It must have stretched down for miles. The flames were getting closer. I wanted to burst in another direction, but was stuck between the beast, the flames, and a hole to the bottom of the earth. The beast stretched its arm toward me. I heard a frog-like, raspy whisper come through me. From the beast, surely, but the beast never opened its mouth. Its sound stemmed from my own brain. "Come with me. I'll be your savior," it said. I looked at the beast's humongous hand, then back at the flames. They were 30 feet away, maybe even a little less. Sweat streamed down my body the same way water flows across your body in the pouring rain. "Don't go. Let the fire take you. The fire is your only way out," another voice said, a lighter, clearer voice more resemblant to my own. The fire was 20 feet away now, at the most. The beast outstretched its other arm, now reaching out to me the way a mother does for a distraught child. It remained still, pleading at me inside my own head to come with it. I stayed put until it moved again. It took one step closer toward the hole. "It's cool down here," it said. "You'll never be hot again." 10 feet away, the flames fully encapsulated what became of my world. The beast, the hole, and me. There was no exit. Either I was going to trust this monster, or I was going to trust myself and face the fire. The fire came, and I accepted it. The last thing I saw was the beast diving into the hole. The world became orange, then white. It hurt. Oh God, everything hurt. My final thought before everything went black was that I had made the wrong choice. Surely the hole would be better than this hell. And then black. My life didn't end there in those woods. I don't know what happened after it all went black. The only thing I know for certain is that I woke up in my own bed this morning. The doors were all locked. There was no sign of entry or exit. Certainly, it must have been a dream. I crept out of bed, stretched, and winced at the pain in my back. I flipped on the TV. A breaking news story was playing. A massive wildfire had occurred in the early morning hours, just a couple miles from my house. Its cause is unknown. What had caused it to cease so abruptly is also unknown. What they do know for sure is that the flames came to a head around a hole in the ground, about 30 feet deep. Shallower than I thought, actually. And here's what I say to you. The beast is still out there, somewhere. I know this because dozens of skeletons were found at the bottom of that hole. All of them human. If the beast comes to you, please, for the love of yourself, do not jump into that hole. I am the last of the Nephilim, and I have made my decision. Written by Ninja Gall 15. "125,000 years ago, there was a city. It was not called Atlantis at the time, but history remembers it as such, so I shall call it by that name. The original name is impossible to pronounce in English anyway. This city was ruled by God, or a powerful being calling itself God. It matters not if this is the God that created the universe, or just an incredibly powerful magi. All that matters is he ruled over Atlantis, cultivating different forms of life and sending them outside the city to the rest of Earth. We were his first. We were called the Nephilim. We are not giants, as depicted in that book you all use, but we look like the average human, only a little taller and covered in brown fur. We lived among them not as equals, but as peers. He created humans in our image, starting with a man and a woman, and sent them off into Earth on their own. He gave us the option to leave, but we declined. We enjoyed Atlantis, living with our God King, learning the secrets of the universe in a never-ending library of knowledge. He left us for a while. He claimed he needed to travel to distant planets to see how other creations and creators were doing, to see how his version of life compared to others. He came back 5,000 years after he left, frowning the whole time. He did not tell us what he had seen, but he had decided to start his world over. He claimed the humans were flawed, as well as the Nephilim and most of the other creatures he had made. In his absence, we had become self-sufficient. We learned the magic behind the machines that ran Atlantis, and often helped the humans in their times of need. We had grown fond of them as our brothers and sisters on this earth. So, 5 of us made a pact in blood, using the old magic. All we had to do was find the courage to go through with it. God spent weeks planning the end. Finally, it began to rain, flooding the earth and killing thousands. The only reason it stopped, and the only reason life continues on Earth, is we chained God to Atlantis and sank it to the bottom of the seas. You may search for it if you wish. You won't find it. It is too far down for any humans to reach with or without your vehicles. But I will not forbid you from searching if you desire. The pact had a drawback, of course. 5 of us agreed, and now only one of us remains. In order to chain God to the sunken city, one of us had to hold him back. This was both simple and impossible, as it only required one of us to stay in the city with him. During this time, God could do anything, except leave the city. We spent eons underwater in the dark, with an omnipotent monster bent on destroying the planet. The entire time we would be down there, we would feel the sensation of drowning, without the relief of death. In addition, God could torment us both with physical pain and mental anguish, until our very souls deteriorated and fell apart. When this happened, the next one of us would swim down to the city and take their place, suffering in the dark waters for as long as they could hold out. The order had been decided in the pact, and the pact had been sealed in blood. In the meantime, the 4 of us lived around the humans, only getting involved if we had to. In more recent times, your kind had invented better technology, so we had to hide more often, although we were sometimes spotted nonetheless. There are legends about us. We even made ourselves a nickname and introduced ourselves as such. You call us Bigfoot, but we are the Nephilim. We have endured more pain than any other living thing in order to protect life on this planet. Which leads me to my dilemma. I am the last of the Nephilim. I can feel my sister fading away, her skin torn, her soul shattered, her lungs demanding breath that would never come. There is not much of her left, and I know that I must go down soon, as we promised years ago. But the problem is, I feel God was right. There is something fundamentally wrong with the humans, and while I was unsure for a long while, the events of this past century have convinced me. I do not believe humans are worth saving. I have seen your kind kill each other over belief and race. I have seen your kind refuse to protect your weaker members. I have seen your kind rob, steal, kill, and rape throughout history. But this decade, it seems humans have completely lost the ability to care about each other. I dream every night of the pain that would be inflicted on me, the hot metal hooks in my limbs, the water flooding into my body, the darkness all around me. I cannot consider it worth it. He may come for me when he gets out, but at least it will be over quick. The alternative is to suffer for beings that would not even consider doing the same, even for members of their own species. I do not know how much longer she will last. I feel her in my head, begging for death, screaming for relief, waiting for me to take the mantle as martyr. I wonder how it feels, her living with the knowledge that when she gives up, all life will end. I have freed myself of that burden. I await the end. It will start soon, within the decade for sure. This is your warning. We gave you a chance, and you have failed. Okay, well, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's episode. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe for more if you haven't already. If you would like to support this channel, I would really appreciate it if you would check out my Patreon page. For as little as $1 a month, you can get access to ad-free narrations, and for just a tiny bit more, you can get much, much more. Also, if you're in the market for any tees, masks, hoodies, sweaters, anything like that, I would really appreciate it if you would check out my merch store. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ClancyPasta, and I will see you all later. Have a good night. Cheers.